last minute this year. Next year may be a struggle. Rocco, we'll start with you. How do you work with the city's financial problems?
Well, I'm the only one who's actually put out a plan to talk about how we're going to deal with the city's financial problems, which are extensive. Not the least of which is the lack of credibility. For 7 years, the mayor told us that we were at the door of the poorhouse unless we kept getting more and more checks from the province and the Fed, and that we absolutely had to have the land transfer tax, absolutely had to have the vehicle registration tax, absolutely had to have the TTC fare increase, and then hold a press conference and say, surprise, we just found $100 million under a sofa. That undermines the credibility of the city. We need multi-year planning, 5-year planning. We need to reduce our debt to free up $450 million. And then, like what the fear-mongering that Mr. Smitherman is going about spreading, the reality is that Toronto Hydro is not the least bit like 407. There is no regulatory regime to control pricing on the 407. That's whatever the market will bear. But hydro is within a carefully guarded, provincial, regulated regime on pricing. And unless Mr. Smitherman is saying that he doesn't trust his former boss, Mr. McGinty, and his colleagues, that they have some plan to deregulate electricity pricing in the province, unless he's saying that, then he's just participating in fear-mongering. That pricing is controlled and regulated by the province. It's not the city, and it's not whoever owns Toronto Hydro. We have to face the labor issue. We need more outsourcing. We need more managed competition to keep a competitive environment at the city and reduce labor costs that have been growing from 2002 to 2008 at 6.5% a year. That's economically unsustainable, and it's not fair to the citizens of Toronto.
Thank you very much. George?
I agree with at least one part of what Rocco said is the City of Toronto has a fiscal credibility problem. And I think tackling that fiscal credibility problem is job one. As a mayor, you should expect that I will join the budget committee and I will be involved in a line-by-line review of the city's budget, which will allow us also to bring a greater focus to the things that the City of Toronto might wish to spend resources on. I think that the city budget process needs to be demystified. It needs to be more transparent and open and to invite people in. And this is part and parcel of the approach that I will lead if I'm fortunate enough to be the mayor of our fantastic city. I do think that over the last number of years, through the federal and provincial gas tax, through some uploading which has occurred, through the introduction of new taxation measures like the land transfer tax, and through regularized tax increases, the amount of resources available to the City of Toronto has improved. The City of Toronto has a culture which says we have a revenue problem. But I think actually, in point of fact, where we need to focus at the City of Toronto is on the expenditure side. I think we have an expenditure problem. And accordingly, a line-by-line review, which will by necessity eliminate some of those hobby horses which have been supported, and which will by necessity find ways to reduce the rise in the cost of labor at the City of Toronto, that we can have a balanced budget on an annual basis, but not at the last minute and not pulled out of someone's suit pocket at the last minute, but rather on a looking forward basis. This establishment of fiscal credibility is job one. On the issue of Toronto Hydro, Mr. Rossi says it's just a matter of price. But anybody that knows that in the relationship about the delivery of an essential service, there's so much more than that. There's about the way you're treated as a customer, and there's about the loss of Toronto Hydro as a tool of the city for the advancement of interests like green energy.
Thank you very much, George. Rob Ford.
Thank you, Roger. I've been saying for 10 years since I was elected in 2000, we don't have a revenue problem. We have a spending problem. And let me give you some examples of where I see the spending problems. They're saying, well, you've got to talk about billions of dollars. If you don't watch the pennies, the dollars will not take care of themselves. My father instilled that into me when I was building a business. Does it make sense to pay someone to water plants $80,000 a year? Hold on, just city plants. Somebody comes in the office, puts up your plant. If there's a sticker that says City of Toronto, he or she waters it. If not, they put it down. That's absolute insanity. You think it's right for councillors to have $100,000 and free food every year at every council meeting? Of course not. Do you think it's right that councillors that make $1,400 a week take home have a tax-free expense account of $53,000 to eat at fancy restaurants, to travel around the world, to wine and dine their friends, and they say, oh, it's city business? You would not survive one day in the private sector taking that approach. The boss would say, out the door. We don't need a $53,000 expense account. We don't need a staff budget. Do you know that every councillor has $210,000 to hire staff? Myself and Doug Alday are the only two councillors that have two staff who've done it successfully for 10 years. These are the minor things. Let's talk to the major things. Let's look at the largest contract, the subway contract. We sole sourced $150 million we could have saved. David Miller decided to sole source to the Marnier, $700 million. Siemens comes in my office and says, I can do it for $550 million. Let's have an open contract. Let's have an open bid. Let's have an open tendering process. No, it was shot down. There's $150 million out the door. So I can talk about millions and I can talk about thousands.
Thank you very much, Bob Ford. Joe Pantalone?
You know, grandmother used to say, it cannot be penny wise and pound foolish. Councillor Ford is suggesting that we start spending less in the city, we're going to get a greater city. You know, let me tell you, there are cities in the Great Lakes which have spent less money. They saved the pennies, and now it's going to cost them the pounds. Cities like Detroit, cities like Cleveland, cities like Buffalo used to be amazing cities. And what happened, their leadership took the approach that Councillor Ford is suggesting, you know, let's not build streetcars, you know, because we can't afford them. Let's not go give grants for environmental initiatives because we can't afford them. Let's not give community grants because you oppose them all the time, you know, because we can't afford them. Even though community grants allow service for seniors, children, you know, everybody else through volunteerism and provide so much more. Yes, we could save those pennies, but it costs us pounds in terms of service not provided to Torontonians. That's not the Toronto that Torontonians want. Mr. Spillerman mentions the fact that it's going to go line by line, you know, on the budget. The question to ask is it going to be applying the same degree of efficiency and excellence as it did when I'm assuming it went line by line on the e-health budget that he started himself, which cost the taxpayers $1 billion, never mind pennies, for which we got zero to show for it. Is that a deal of controlling spending in City Hall? No. Frankly, we got to go knocking on McGinty's door because municipalities only get 5.6% of all the taxes paid in Ontario. Provincial and federal get 94.4%. There's a disconnect there. So for streetcars or anything important, they have to pay their share because you're paying those taxes in the provincial government and the federal government. They cannot say it's none of their business. We pay, you know, $250 million plus for transit subsidy, which they used to pay for. We all get it ripped off. We got to knock off on McGinty's door to get it.